Welcome to our guide on how to roll out threat modeling in your organization. Today we will cover these topics: defining values and principles as per the threat modeling manifesto, what a rollout plan should look like, what resources you should create, gaining initial buy-in, getting also the developers and teams involved, and increasing the buy-in from the top down. We will also welcome some of the IriusRisk professionals from different business areas as special guests after each section to share their insights based on their experience and role. The Threat Modeling Manifesto is proposing to initially define two guidelines: values, something that has relative worth, merit, or importance. Whilst we may value items on the right, we value items on the left more, for example, and principles, the fundamental truth of threat modeling. So fundamental, primary, or general truth that enables successful threat modeling, patterns that are highly recommended, and anti-patterns that should be avoided. For additional details, information, and to download your own manifesto, visit www.threatmodelingmanifesto.org. Raser, you as the VP of Product within IriusRisk are also one of the authors of the Threat Modeling Manifesto. Is there any recommendation you can give on how to use the manifesto when somebody starts their threat modeling journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to remember with the manifesto is that it is a manifesto. So one of the principal sort of ideas behind it is a call to action. So the manifesto was made by a group of very well-known, well-respected threat modeling professionals. And it was really brings together their experience over, sometimes decades, in terms of the things that we've seen out there in the world that we really would like to see a lot more of when people are doing threat modeling, because these are proven things that work well and values that work well for organizations, and as well as knowing when things are going wrong and how best to avoid that. So the manifesto was like a call to action to say, here are some values and principles that help guide you in the right direction and away from all these pitfalls and things like that. So the manifesto, again, is a call to action. It's made up of values and principles. And the whole point of that is that it is not a recipe. It's not a cookie cutter prescription of how you must threat model, because every organization is different. So what it tries to do is provide you a bit of a North Star, some guide rails, some guidance to say, in my organization, in my context, what would move me in the right direction, and what will help me steer away from the wrong direction. But you've got to apply it and think about it in the context of your organization. So one of the challenges when you're starting off with threat modeling is to understand, okay, well, what does threat modeling look like in my organization? What should threat modeling look like in my organization? And again, there's no one answer to that. It really depends on your organization. Large enterprises in the financial services industry may have their threat modeling dominated by regulations, and that's okay. Smaller organizations or more tech savvy organizations probably need something more developer centric and much more cultural, and that's also okay. But the manifesto, what that tries to do is just bring a bit of balance. The danger for the large organizations that are sort of typically compliance driven is they can go down some sort of rabbit holes with becoming overly focused on the compliance aspect of it, and how much you're driven by the compliance. The whole goal of threat modeling is to improve the security of the applications. And if you're doing that well, you get the compliance for free. So that's why the manifesto talks about a culture of finding and fixing design issues over the compliance checkbox kind of mentality. So you'll get the compliance for free. Whereas another organization, they may have a very different approach to their development processes, and threat modeling may need to operate in a different way. So again, the manifesto provides some sort of North Star and some guidance as to how to think about threat modeling. It doesn't give you the recipes for, you need to do stride by component, or you need to use Pascal or something like, or you need to use this tool. It's really there to just give some guidance as you're thinking about designing that threat modeling program.
That makes sense.
And understanding what's really sort of true to your organization.
Okay. And then in that context, then, because there is not one clear cut, not one way and one recipe, as you said, what would you say are potentially the don'ts? Whereas, so obviously the do's are in the manifesto, but could you define any don'ts?
Yeah, so there are some anti-patterns in the manifesto. I've got them there. A lot of the time we get it's not limited to threat modeling. This happens in any kind of process. We become a little bit dominated and obsessed with the process itself, and we forget the fact that the process is actually serving another need and isn't the thing that you actually should be over focusing on. You should be focusing on the need that the process is trying to serve. And so there is this tendency to get a little bit carried away with making sure the threat modeling process is perfect and over engineering it, when again it's just a means to an end. It's a means to understanding the security implications and assumptions in your systems and your software, and helping the people who build the software to make better decisions and to build better security. So don't over obsess about the nitty-gritty details of the threat modeling process. Just find something that works. That's a classic one you see. We tend to get carried away with this process. The other thing that you often see is security people in particular, in my experience, like to theorize about security issues.
Right.
And we like to think about all the things that can go wrong, and we get a little bit sort of obsessed again with the academic research aspect of it. So again, with threat modeling, you could take an application and you could spend hours, days, weeks thinking of all the possible things that go wrong, but there's a diminishing returns there. So don't focus too much on the threats and and just the sort of the things that can go wrong. Again, the point of threat modeling is not just to find a bunch of threats, it's actually to take actions that improve the security of the system. So that's really where you should be focusing in. The classic way you see this is with the use of STRIDE. So STRIDE is not a categorization, it's a mnemonic for helping you think about threats. It doesn't matter whether a particular threat is a tampering or a repudiation threat. The fact is you found the threat, now move on to what you can actually do about it, rather than whether it's a category this or whether it's a high threat or a low threat, whatever. Fact is, think about the impact and now focus on what actually matters, which is making the improvements to the security. And I'll just give you one more. In the manifesto, it's referred to as the hero threat modeler. Again, cybersecurity has classically had this sort of pedestal of, well, only the super securities experts can do the threat modeling. And you silly developers don't know anything about security, so you don't know what's doing. Just give me all of your documentation and I'll do all the threat modeling for you, because you wouldn't do a very good job. That's just not really how threat modeling should work. So threat modeling does need the security perspective, of course, because security experts do understand the threat landscape. They understand the sort of controls you can put into place. But nobody understands these systems better than the developers and the engineers themselves, who are the ones responsible for building the system. And no amount of documentation is going to give a security person the context they need to do a good job of threat modeling. And the chances are the threat modeling that the security team is going to create isn't going to land very well with the development team, because it just comes across as throwing over a bunch of issues to the development team saying, oh, you didn't do this very good, go and do this better, slap on the wrist kind of thing. Whereas if you get the developers to engage in it, and anyone can do threat modeling, you get the developers to engage in the process and to own the process, you'll see a lot better response, and you'll see that sort of buy-in from those developers. They'll do it themselves, and it is a process that they do naturally. They just do it to of availability and performance. They don't do it in terms of security. So security's role really is to help them think about the security side of things in a way that they do anyway.
A rollout plan can greatly vary. However, a phased approach has proven to be the most successful. At each phase of the rollout, the evidence of value should be the key focus. Demonstrate the value of threat modeling by showing how it enables better collaboration, better security, and lower costs. So here are the phases. Phase 1, deliver value first. Ensure your stakeholders are able to see that there is value in what you're doing. Showing the tool set and its full capabilities too soon can diffuse the focus from the important deliverable. Phase 2, recruit your virtual team of security champions. One of the best methods of collaboration is to recruit the security champions within the developer teams. This can be individuals who are friendly with your team and eager to collaborate, or developers looking to upskill in the security space. The ability to speak freely to each other and aim to collaborate as a team. Phase 3, test small. Ideally, start running a small pilot program with a small real-world project, leveraging the team that you already demonstrated some value to and is opening to extending their collaboration. Collect the value from these teams as the pilot should be reusable with other teams, gathering together the value that has been created as ultimate output. Phase 4, gather evidence and plan your next step. If they have not been involved already, it may be a great idea to demonstrate the evidence of value to senior stakeholders and build support from top down to support the wider rollout. David, as a solutions architect at IriusRisk, I was curious to have your point of view on this. So specifically when rolling out threat modeling as a new project in the business, why do you think or why do you see a phased approach as the best practice?
So I don't think rolling out IriusRisk is any different to any other new technology in a business. And a phased approach, for me personally, has always been a more appropriate mechanism for enabling a business with any kind of technology, especially in the IT and software development space. It just makes it easier to control the rollout. It's easier to provide education to users. So if you go for the big bang, which is the typical other alternative, which is you turn something on and point everybody at it, you've got all of your staff to train, you've got to enable them, you've got to provide the support services, and everybody gets to see the system at one go. With a phased approach, you get to kind of introduce it to kind of pilot projects. They get to provide feedback. You're able to refine the kind of processes that you've got and the usage model, and over time you kind of improve until a point where it's much easier to go BAU. And because you go through a phased approach and pilots, you get to educate some SMEs, some kind of early adopters, and they can help to socialize and to educate the technology to the rest of the business. So almost like I don't know, influencers in social media kind of thing. I think phased approach definitely always the best way to go.
And I guess that also ties into the value, right? The more SMEs you have, the more value you can actually extrapolate from a tool, right? Yeah.
So your SMEs become your security champions, are able to kind of educate those who are coming afterwards, and so forth. So you're able to grow value much easier. You don't have that kind of big mass of bodies that you're trying to influence at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the value then, David, if you're on or somebody's unsure how best to prove value or how to communicate it when planning to roll out a threat modeling project specifically, what would your recommendation be?
So I guess before you even purchase our product, we generally go through some kind of selection criteria process, which normally involves some hands-on proof of concept, proof of value, however organizations want to describe it. And as part of that, you normally define some kind of success criteria, which is what are the kind of functional things and non-functional things we want the technology to achieve. And ultimately that traces back to kind of business objectives of what as a business do we want out of this particular technology. With threat modeling, we want to be able to identify threats, vulnerabilities in our software applications at the design stage, rather than much later in the software development stage, in the CI/CD pipeline, in release, at which point it becomes much more expensive to actually remediate any problems we identify. So the kind of business objectives that we have when selecting a tool are the kind of things we want to measure to be able to show that we're actually achieving those things. So depending on what those business objectives are. So I think it's always useful to trace back to those kind of objectives when we're selecting technology, and these are the goals we're trying to achieve. And that might be long-term goals. So you've got to kind of set milestones over time. And if we go back to the previous question saying we're taking a phased approach, then each phase or each pilot project can provide feedback. They can identify gaps where there may be problems, and identify opportunities for additional value to make it much easier to sell the product internally, kind of thing. So I think that makes sense.
Yes, I was about to say it makes a lot of sense. So maybe a last question for you that might be somewhat be an obvious one, but I'll ask it nonetheless. Why do you see this beneficial to test small?
So that really ties back to the phased approach, really. As I say, testing small, it's much easier to kind of test a small thing to get feedback and to then fix any kind of issues you have with it. If you're, so I guess if you go back to, so how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat one chunk at a time. You can't test a whole system in one go. You have to kind of test individual increments. You have to create a test plan and test framework to test individual functions and features, and then you build up a much bigger testing framework for each of the functions and features until when you get to the end of the project, you've got actually a fully fledged test framework that will actually be able to regression test the entire application. And I appreciate that's a very simplified kind of description, but hey, we don't have all week to kind of describe. So testing small means you get much quicker feedback. You can react to any kind of problems and then make changes. So the next iteration, the next phase, you're delivering on those changes, much improved in usability and that kind of thing. And hopefully that means that it's very quickly you can get a process and a set of procedures that people can use and allow you to go to business as usual much more rapidly, rather than kind of just going, here's what we want to do to everybody, finding out it doesn't work, everybody stops working, you have to rework it. It becomes much harder to restart that engagement. If you've disappointed everybody once, the next time you come to restart the use of the technology, people are going to be a little skeptical. If you have to go and do it again, then you're going to meet a lot of resistance when you're trying to kind of scale to the entire team.
It is important to create a repository for all your stakeholders that allows them to learn about the goals of the rollout and how to use the tools they need to use the platform to threat modeling, as well as how to collaborate with all other stakeholders. Training for your team. First and foremost, your team will need to be able to enforce how your team uses the threat modeling tool and ensure it is configured to make it easy for all the wider use base to use efficiently. So your first focus should be on ensuring that your team knows where to go and when they need to make changes, also what to use. Types of resources you can consider are, for example, threat modeling and overview, purpose strategic aims, process training, and tool training. So it can be some in-house made or some IriusRisk made materials. Training for other teams. It's important to also use some of the same resources with the other teams that will be involved, even if they won't be involved until a later stage. This should leverage the resources you already created, but also some more team-specific, or at least area of business-specific resources to help them understand the context. There's, of course, different approaches, but you can use Confluence and wikis. They tend to be very useful as a repository to be shared. Type of resources as listed here are, for example, articles covering training, the project, the benefits, etc. How to use guides to get the people started quickly, screenshots of the tool to help guide people around it and navigate through it, short videos of certain functions, and Slack channels or Microsoft Teams channels to reach out internally for guidance. Thanks for jumping in here. So obviously, as customer success architect at IriusRisk, you actively help new customers onboarding and have these conversations. So I'm curious to hear from you, is there anything that successful teams, successful clients do when they're rolling out a threat modeling in their company?
I think so, absolutely. For me, the biggest good sign when I'm working with a new customer is whether they're working immediately with a product, right? Just whether they're jumping in, they're making mistakes, they're playing around with the different features right away. I think that's a great sign of a team that's going to do very good at it. You know, rather than seeking perfection from the very beginning or even before, right? Like not wanting to do anything until every in and out is understood perfectly. So that for me is a good sign. I think that's the thing is whether you're focused on perfection or whether you're focused on improvement. And I see threat modeling, just like with many other things, as an iterative process. So, you know, from an agile perspective, don't set your goals too high at the beginning. You just get in there, you start doing stuff. You see what works, you see what doesn't work, and then you just improve over time.
So the collaboration, I would say then in this case as well, with the team and just an active communication would be a key from your perspective as well.
Absolutely, from all levels. You know, what works for the development teams who are going to be mitigating issues and problems, what works well for the executive team that is just observing this from a distance. Yeah, I mean, all these different opinions need to be taken into account to determine whether you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, great. And in regards of the resources, then, if we're talking about onboarding maybe one new team or multiple, of course, do you have any recommendation of what materials, what resources would be the most suitable?
Yeah, I mean, so of course, IriusRisk has a lot of very good material in the support pages in the internet. A lot of documents that give tips and tricks about how to solve common problems or how to do things from an overall perspective. You know, you hit the nail on the head with the idea of collaboration, right? Talk with your colleagues, see what they're looking at, see what they're finding. Threat modeling isn't a new topic. So, you know, look at YouTube, see what other people are coming up with, what they've come up with in the past. And to that point, there's Threat Modeling Connect, which is a great resource for maybe more a theoretical approach to threat modeling as well. So that's something I highly recommend to customers. And finally, also collaborative. Speak with us. Speak with your IriusRisk team, and see if there's some way we can help you there as well.
Sounds great. Sounds great. And just to reiterate, maybe one point I would be quite curious. You mentioned about maybe not aiming for perfection right away. Right. So what would be in practice the start? Would you just have, or would you rather have an approach that, you know, there is a meeting and, you know, everybody diagrams together, or if it's segregated teams, what's your view on that?
That's a good question, and I think actually there's a couple different aspects there. The one is just the learning the tool and understanding what can be done with the tool, and there absolutely have a workshop with the different people. You know, see what people are able to do and to you know, learn from the tool and to share with you and your other teammates. And then the other aspect is knowing what your goals are, and don't set them too high, right? So maybe look at the next iteration of your diagram, what you want to achieve with that next iteration, and do it with, if you will, as few mouse strokes as possible. So don't bring in unnecessary detail. Define done, and then look and see what you have and how good it is. And it's not finished. Next week or the week after, you'll decide what your next goal is, and you can add to it or alter it or what have you. So very iterative, very collaborative. I think that's all a great recipe for success.
So it's very important to start with the why. Opening threat modeling up to everyone in your organization is often an approach that is unsuccessful. There can be a number of reasons for this, including but not limited to that the teams who are not currently threat modeling might not realize the value in spending time doing it. It may sound like extra work. It's someone else's responsibility. So what can we do to get the buy-in from other stakeholders? Again, start with the why. If you're looking to roll out threat modeling in your organization, it is for a good reason, so share it. So, for example, again, some guidance. Limit discovery of security vulnerabilities late in the software development cycle. Security is trying to make things easier for developers, and having the security discussion at the beginning means security requirements are understood early. Increased collaboration makes development easier. It helps developers to understand security requirements better. It saves time by removing long workshops and processes, and it helps speed up development by removing security bottlenecks. Again, just a couple of questions for you both. So AJ, you're customer success architect at IriusRisk, so of course have more the technical perspective of things. And Julian, of course, you're customer success manager, so you're more into strategic topics. So I was really curious to get your view on this. So if we're talking about buy-in, from your point of view, how do successful customers really get this important buy-in from the team? Who wants to start?
Sure, I could start. So what we see for buy-in is kind of a top-down approach, since threat modeling isn't well known to everybody. We've seen that if the senior management really partners with us and we take that top-down approach, and there's a mandate, we've really seen success when it's been mandated at the organizational level. And so we can gauge all of this from our meetings with the customer, where management is getting involved, helps drive the agenda, and really is part of a team in driving the mandate to threat model. Yeah, and so I think that it shows, it's clear that we create this partnership more than we're just another vendor. So they understand that with the partnership, we're working to help them succeed and be successful with our threat modeling program.
Sounds great. AJ, from your side, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, from my perspective, where customers are successful in getting the buy-in, I would say it's a two-part process. So firstly, they recognize and understand the key differentiators which IriusRisk brings as part of their overall security strategy. So for example, there are various source code-based security scanning tools which an organization may already have. You may have come across them they're under the umbrella of SaaS, DAST, and SCA tools. Now, in comparison, IriusRisk models the application's architecture and data flows, and that's at the design stage. And then it automates what the potential attack vectors are with their associated vulnerabilities, and also provides the mitigation strategies. So they recognize the net benefit to their existing security technology stack. And so they are able to communicate this effectively across their organization. Now, I would say the second part follows on from this, which is to establish team champions, okay? In various spaces, for example, the security team, the operations development team, You've got the governance, compliance, and legal teams. And here, the team champions in their respective spaces lead the engagement with their teams and peers by developing the processes needed to glue it together, since they recognize it very much requires a collaboration approach to be successful.
Sounds great. Thanks for the input. Maybe just one follow-up question again for both of you on that. So if anything, what would you recommend if a customer asks for your help or some guidance if they struggle with getting this buy-in? Any tips?
Sure, I'll start. It's really about having a vision and setting a goal. So really having a vision of where you want to be, 6 months, a year, 2 years time, and setting those goals and clear business objectives in terms of your security strategy, and working in partnership with your CSM within IriusRisk to help you get there. We found that as customers develop their processes and there's accountability across the businesses, they become more efficient and effective with their workflows. Also, we see that customers have established our high levels of maturity in their processes. They're able to adopt and scale much faster. So it's, again, it goes back to that vision and setting goals. And we here as the customer success team at IriusRisk can help you identify goals and processes to become more effective and efficient.
Great, thank you. AJ, what about you?
Yeah, so I would say one of the things we deliver training sessions to our customers, and this is part of the onboarding process. And this provides them, the overview, how the tool works, and the various features. Now, I would say this is a very good opportunity for organizations to get their team champions involved and also engage with each other. We recommend customers provision, the access to the platform for their users, as ideally as part of the training session, so they can start to learn early from a hands-on approach. In terms of who to include in the training sessions, we recommend inviting those folks which cover the various personas within their organization. So the example from above, you would potentially include your security team members, development team, again, IT operations, legal team, etc. The key, I would say, is to start building your threat models early, even if it's at the basic level. You have to start somewhere, and we've all been there, that blank page syndrome. But don't let that, don't let that get the better of you. And to help, we also have extensive set of online materials for consumption. So we recommend bookmarking our support page, which is simply support.iriusrisk.com.
To the security champions, establishing a security champion program is one of the most effective things you do to start to roll out threat modeling. Simply speaking, it is a program for recruiting developers and getting them to take the lead for threat modeling within their own development teams. What does the program look like? Developers who have an interest in security, developers who are already friendly to your team can be a very good choice. They will become your security representation within their team. Train them like you would train your own security team. They can help explain their value to their own team. They can train their developers and act as a local, immediate contact for their team. And we want a representative from each development team. One from each team is enough. Virtual overlay teams. To effectively engage with your security champions, you should create a virtual overlay team. This will act as a virtual team that brings all of your security champions together. Remember, they are the sole security champion within their own development team, so it's worth making them part of the team. There are other benefits too. For example, establish a two-way connection for feedback to and from development teams. Keep your security champions up to date with latest developments in the threat modeling process and the tools they use. Get messaging out to the dev team via security champions. Track the usage of threat modeling within the design process more effectively via the security champions. You will be able to provide your security champion the support they need Remember, security design is still the security team's responsibility. The champions are there to help you, not responsible for implementation. Treat them as a genuine extension of your security team. Wanting to pick your brains on this one as well. So what do you recommend really on how to effectively engage the development teams into threat modeling?
Yeah, so when you're starting a threat modeling program, in fact, ideally before, but certainly in the early days, the first thing I would go and do is go and talk to the developers. Go and understand, because it might be that you're in the security team and you've never really spoken to the developers about how they work or how they make decisions. It may be that you're used to talking to them about static analysis or vulnerability management and all that kind of things, and other sort of traditional AppSec approaches. But if you're starting a threat modeling program, go and talk to them and understand how they design their applications, what tools do they use, how do they work, how do they plan, how do they make decisions, etc. And because if threat modeling is to be done by developers, which it should be, you want to find a way in which the threat modeling works for those development teams. That obviously security will have its own needs. There may be compliance needs or reporting needs, or maybe you need certain applications to be threat modeled based on sort of criticality. So that's fine, but the developers also have needs. They aren't typically being paid to do security. They get paid to solve business problems and ship value to their users and to the business by writing code. So anything that security does typically slows that down. And so they're incentivized to want to avoid doing security practices. The thing with threat modeling is if you engage the developers early on, if you frame it in terms that they understand and you don't come across as this sort of overbearing security person with all this jargon and things like that, if you help them to understand threat modeling as a practice, they pick it up very easily and they understand the value of it very, very quickly. So really, it's just a case of sort of teaching them some tools. So just try and keep the friction low and try and understand how it relates and how it fits into their world. And the best way to start that is to go and talk to them, to go and understand, and then you sort of factor that into your sort of the design. One thing that we saw this in Agile, we saw this in DevOps, and I'm hoping we won't see this in threat modeling, but one thing you mustn't lose sight of is the cultural foundations on which all of this kind of stuff happens.
Right.
So understanding the way the engineers work together, the way the engineers work with other parts of the business, the way communication flows happen, the way tooling flows happen, these kind of cultural things should be at the forefront of your mind when you're rolling out a threat modeling program, because if you introduce a change that clashes with that culture, it's going to be an uphill battle right from the start. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about the threat modeling program in a culturally sort of compatible way, if you like.
So obviously that would then of course mean that one of the core values, of course, would be having a cross-functional team that works together.
Yeah.
Do you see then threat modeling tool as well and IriusRisk as a platform could this be also used to establish such a cross-pollination and cross-collaboration?
Yeah, the whole idea of a cross-functional team is in the development world, you're trying to achieve autonomy. So you want all of the people who are needed to achieve a particular thing working together, and so you're not dependent on some team over there who's going to block your ability to do something or other. So you want as many people together. And the other thing is the diversity of perspective and the diversity of understanding. The thing to remember with threat modeling is that it is a modeling process, right? So the threat model is not reality. It's only ever going to be a subset of the reality of the system and of the security and of the possible controls that you could implement. And so you may need to threat model from different perspectives. You need different perspectives in the threat modeling process as well. A developer will give you one set of ideas, and a quality engineer will give you a different set of ideas. So if you can bring together these different perspectives, then threat modeling has a much greater chance of being successful. And threat modeling, you're not aiming for completeness here. You're never going to threat model something up to 100% completion, because again, the modeling process is always inherently incomplete and imperfect. So you're just looking for that good enough state. What the challenge is for security is you can have a cross-functional team made up of front-end developers, back-end developers, DevOps engineers, and QA engineers. We don't have, no organizations really have the resources to have a security person in every single one of those teams either. So there are two ways of working around that problem. One of them, which is very powerful, is the security champion. So that is not necessarily putting a full-time security person in each of the development teams, but by lifting up a developer or a DevOps engineer or a QA person, or even a product manager, or whoever it is, who has an interest in security, and giving them additional responsibilities and additional capabilities to take on sort of that security mindset within their development team. A lot of organizations are looking at that anyway, and that's a really powerful sort of gateway for threat modeling, because if you've got a security engineer in a team, they're naturally the one to say, hey guys, we need to do some threat modeling. Let's go make sure that we're threat modeling this new feature, or let's go put our threat modeling, or let's go and put it in our review process, or let's put threat modeling into our sprint planning process, etc. So that is a very powerful tool. But again, the security champion probably isn't going to be an expert in security. The point that they become an expert in security, they're probably going to want to get a job in security, so they'll lead the development team at that point probably. So you're always going to have this mismatch, and that's where a tool like IriusRisk comes in. The knowledge base that IriusRisk has embedded in it, and that you can extend, your security team can extend, IriusRisk bridges the gap between the knowledge the development teams have about the system and all of the threats and the controls that you need to know about out there in the world. IriusRisk pulls those two together. So in that sense, it is a point of collaboration between the security world and the non-security world, even if it's done asynchronously, because the security people are putting the knowledge base into the product, and the development team are consuming it by creating their threat models.
Great insight, thanks. Maybe lastly then, again, the question on any don'ts. So if you're planning to bring on a new team potentially, anything that should rather be avoided?
Yes, there's probably quite a few things. Don't belittle them. So don't come across as, hey, development team, just do this because I'm telling you to. You don't know what you're doing. Just do as I say. Again, you need to build on these cultural foundations of trust, respect, mutual understanding, diversity, and all that kind of stuff. Another thing is to not put too much friction in front of a development team. If they have a particular way of working and you come with this approach that introduces too much friction, they don't have a choice but to ignore your requirements or your needs or your process. Or even worse, the worst thing, this is one of the dangers of compliance. If you force somebody to do something for compliance reasons and it's not a very good process, you won't know that it's not working effectively, because you'll see it being done, but what you won't see is it being done well necessarily. Whereas if there's too much friction, the development teams can say, well, this is too hard, it doesn't make any sense, I'm just not going to do it. That at least gives you an indication of, we're not making progress because none of the development teams are actually doing this because they don't want to, because it's too hard, etc. So where you're introducing this process, make sure that you're doing it in a way that they see the value from it, and it doesn't stop them doing what they need to do and what they get paid to do. Because otherwise, the worst thing is you'll get a false sense of security because, oh, they're doing the threat modeling, but they're just doing the bare minimum to get by, to check the box, to get you off their back. And that's a worst outcome, because everyone thinks, oh, we're doing well. But the reality is the developers didn't put their heart and mind into it. They don't really care what the outcome is. They just check the box. The security team thinks that they've got doing really well with their threat modeling program because they've got all these threat models, even though they might not actually be that valuable. So yeah, just again, keep the friction low and work with the engineering teams to make sure they're seeing the value as well.
Getting the buy-in from the top down will ensure that the benefits of threat modeling are understood, which will be especially useful for ensuring that threat modeling is adopted as a core part of your design and security process. Firstly, by demonstrating collaboration. There are some useful ways of demonstrating the value threat modeling has had in your process. Focus on contrasting the previous state with the new state of things. Now, threat modeling is being performed. Things like, How long was the process of identifying security requirements before? Was there multiple workshops with the teams? Was there the need to manually identify threats from scratch? How long have you spent defining appropriate countermeasures? Also, if you weren't threat modeling at all before, how many security requirements are you able to define at the start of the development process now? How much more secure does this make your organization? And what was the relationship between the development and security before? Is it closer now? Is it easier to communicate security requirements now? Secondly, proving ROI. Proving aspects of ROI can be a powerful tool in gaining buy-in. Much like the above, it is useful to put figures together, such as the time spent before versus the time spent now in creating security requirements, so the time saved. If you weren't doing secure design before, then we would normally identify the threats versus when we identify them now. This is the time and money saved by implementing each security requirement earlier in the sales software development lifecycle. If you're looking for specific figures for saving for IriusRisk, you can download the study commissioned by IriusRisk, Forrester Consulting, where we evaluate the total economic impact of our threat modeling platform. Some of the key highlights include returned 203% ROI in efficiency over manual modeling, saved almost $5 million in software remediation costs, saved $4 million in reporting and compliance, and reduced time to threat model from 80 hours to only 8 hours. So Christina, I have a couple of questions for you. So you're the COO and co-founder of IriusRisk. So I would be really curious to hear, so in reference of the recently published Forrester guide, we know that there's significant ROI and cost savings connected to threat modeling. Are there any other KPIs, however, that you would see as important that also provide value to the leadership in context of threat modeling?
Well, yes, there's plenty of it. Starting from that, IriusRisk is a tool for planning for security, and every company has a security plan, or they should have a security plan. And with this tool, you can also measure progress of the implementation for that plan. Mm-hmm. And the KPIs, therefore, that will be the first of all will be velocity. How quickly are we implementing security controls? Another one is the speed of the risk reduction. Hmm. And another one is the ability to look across your portfolio and identify patterns to improve security efficiency. For example, imagine that you're a business owner and you see all across your portfolio the business units, like there's a business unit in France, in Spain, in Colombia, in Singapore, and the one in Singapore is doing exceptionally good implementing security controls. So as a business owner, you will go like, well, what are they doing? What is their secret sauce? So let's ask the Singapore business unit to make a case study or a training program for the other business units. Another example will be, so you can focus your training in specific areas. Another example will be which security control takes the longest to implement. And then as a business owner, you will go, is there an alternative to that cost of time and money for that implementation? And yeah, it's much more, even just because you are drawing your architecture of your applications, of your portfolio, of your systems, even just that functionality, it's worth having a tool like IriusRisk.
Very insightful. Yeah, great feedback. Great. And out of curiosity as well, in terms of timing, if somebody is looking to really roll out threat modeling as a new project in the business, when do you see the maximum value of including leadership, really? When is it best
to include them? in the process. Yes. Well, the leadership should be periodically and from the start informed of high-risk projects. That is something that for me is key. The thing is that you have to translate first the technical risk into business risk. Once it's translated, the company can take informed decisions of accepting or mitigating the risk. So leadership needs to know about the high risk projects, as well as how to improve efficiency of the resources they have. And the company must be interested in understanding the risk. These high-risk applications or projects that haven't met their security by design protocols, for example. And yeah, identifying where to improve efficiency. And that is a bonus from IriusRisk as well. The company, the IriusRisk is a tool that will provide as well auditing benefits. So leadership can jump into the tool and see what happened with the risk, and they can explain, they can see perfectly who accepted the risk, at what point, what was the reason. So there is much more for the platform than just threat modeling.
Thank you for joining our session. If you're still looking for more material or information, please visit our homepage, IriusRisk.com, and look out for our PDF version of our guide, How to Roll Out Threat Modeling. Thank you.